We're live now.
Oh, we're live. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
we are live.
Okay. Okay. Hello. Hello. So, while we are waiting a little bit here for people to connect, I'll just introduce me and Drew for those of you who don't know us. My name is Anna, and I'm writing neuroscience and psych therapy here on Substack. And my conversation partner for today is the amazing Drew Linsalata, who is also on. It's my he is my Substack friend, and Drew is a writer of The Anxious Truth here on Substack. He's also a therapist, a best-selling author, educator, and mental health advocate. And he is the host of the Anxious Truth podcast and co-host of Disordered. And so today, what we have in store for you is we'll be talking about how to sniff out self-help and mental health bullshit.
That's
For
accurate.
those of you who consume things about mental health, so therapists, but also people who are just want to know about it more and are consumers of these things. And what I really want to say also is that me and Drew have bonded over our low tolerance for bullshit
Yeah.
in general. And to kind of honor that, I think we'll both try to talk as little bullshit today as possible. But
Yeah.
we'll just have to see. We
Yeah.
promise we'll try. Yeah.
We'll make it a
I
BS-free zone.
I think I speak for both when I say we'll try, you know.
Yeah.
And so I mean I don't know if I get all this
Yeah, that
right.
was more. Yeah, that was more than you needed to do. It was all good. Thank you, Anna. Very nice. Thank you for inviting me on.
You're welcome, and thank you for joining me. And I guess, you know, when we think about our audiences, maybe they're a little bit different because I imagine I don't know who is my audience because I don't know all the people who kind of subscribe and follow. But I'm assuming there's lots of people who are therapists, and I'm kind of thinking maybe for you it's more people who you know are on the side of kind of consuming the therapy. Is that correct, or would you say both?
No, I suspect that most of my audience are people who would be on the consumer side of therapy, although I'm always surprised at the number of clinicians who are following along. So,
Mm.
hey, if you are a therapist in the audience, hello, welcome.
Yeah, and I guess why I'm saying that is I guess there's a slight difference in terms of responsibility.
Yes.
I would say that's sometimes I might kind of how I write be a bit harsh because I feel that as clinicians, it's, you know, the burden and responsibility is on us to do our research
Mhm.
and to know what we are offering to the client really.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit kind of the bar is a bit higher, I suppose, in that sense. I just want to say just a few housekeeping things before we just start properly is that this live will be recorded and will be posted then on our respective Substacks. And also we'll try to do a little kind of summary, lowdown after we've done this, with all the little nuggets of wisdom that
Wow. I don't know if I could promise any wisdom, but okay.
well, what are we doing then? I have my
Very good.
pen. I have my pen for the wisdom, for the guru wisdom. I'm joking. So just in case that some of you have to leave before, not to worry, they will be recording and we'll also send something that maybe summarizes what we've been talking about with, you know, some of the maybe, because we're talking about how to sniff out bullshit. Maybe we'll come up with a sort of like checklist of things to kind of look out for when we are deciding whether something is worth our while in terms of a new approach or hack or whatever it is.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so how to kick off this conversation? I mean, I don't know, maybe the good start would be to I mean, if I ask you, for example, where your interest for this, not for anxiety as such, but
Right.
in terms of, for, you know, the bullshit, what I call neurobologs. I guess neurobologs is neuroscience bullshit. You are kind of more general in general, maybe bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
But where your interest comes from?
my interest really comes from, I mean, honestly, I have a huge respect for the scientific method. I always have. I think it's kind of got us out of the dark ages in a lot of ways, and it's working well for us. It is not perfect. We all know that. Science moves at a glacial pace. It's really hard to wait for it when you're suffering and you're looking for answers. So I do 100% understand that. But for me, I think what really kicked it off is as I started talking to a microphone and doing a podcast about anxiety disorders, many years ago, as that got bigger and bigger, sort of accidentally, I started attracting people who wanted to teach me how to peddle bullshit for profit. Because if you have a microphone and a camera, clearly you must be in it to build a giant audience and make a personal brand and be an influencer and make money, level up to that seven figure or whatever. So it was appalling to me. Now, as a former sufferer of the things that I talk and write about, I was fortunate enough to go through the thick of it before the internet could fire hose me with nonsense. But I still see my audience every day getting, in that slipstream where it's just a fire hose of quick cures and hacks and promises. And the one thing that science says, this is the one thing you need to know about your anxiety. And I would just see people come back again and again and again through the comment section. And I used to have a really active face group, and they tried this and they tried that and they tried this and they tried that. And either they just lost a lot of money, which was unfortunate for sure. But more than anything else, they would wind up really discouraged because every single person would promise that this was the science-based way out of it. And then when it wasn't, they would draw the conclusion that like, well, my anxiety must be special and worse and I'm unfixable. And that's just heartbreaking. So I don't know. I just decided I don't like that. So if I see it, I'm going to say something about it. I don't know if
Mhm.
that makes any sense, but yeah, that's how I got here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I guess um, I just wonder, the question, I guess, one of the questions we will explore a little bit, I suppose, is because we will try, as we said, we're discussing before, we kind of said we'll try to avoid the ranting, which we both can do about
Yeah.
this topic, and try to kind of give you something that's a bit more constructive and maybe some reflection on why it happens and also, how to avoid it. So, and I guess when I think about it, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say because it took me really a while to kind of see what is a common, what is a common denominator between all those kind of narratives that we are offered, as in what's, it's, that I kind of work with attachment a lot. And I've over time,
Mhm.
I heard all sorts of things, but it's always attachment is all about fill in the blank.
Right. Right.
And in terms of, and so a little bit later, I realized, well, actually, it was not obvious to me from the beginning, but actually, all of these narratives, they have this in common, which is I'm going to reduce the whole phenomenon onto one simple thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that might work, in some kind of in situations in life in general. But I guess, when when it comes to mental health, which is related to brain, I
Mhm.
mean, it's really difficult to say that brain, one behavior, one complex trait can be it's just this.
Yeah.
And that is what I see as kind of the first red flag to me, is that when is this kind of oversimplified, because of course all science simplifies. I mean, there is a fine line
Oh.
where science is about simplifying,
Mhm.
about finding what's relevant to explain something, but then then we go into the extreme where attachment is all about three states of nervous system.
Yeah.
Like, and what about all these other billions of neural cells? No, no, forget about that.
Yeah.
It's all about this. And so I think, for me, this is kind of become now a big red flag when I hear this kind of discourse of, oh, well, it's all about this. Forget about everything else.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if you would agree with
Yeah,
that.
and I think we fall into that. I mean, listen, on both sides, whether you are a consumer of that information as a therapy client or somebody just looking to improve their wellness, or you are a clinician, trying to use that and apply that in your work, we all fall into that emotional trap. Like, I think we are drawn into things. First of all, at training as a therapist, I was really amazed when I was told, as long as it's a theory, it's all good. Pick what you want. So, I think people have a right to know that. Like, people ask me all the time, like, why doesn't my therapist talk about my anxiety the way you do? Well, they have their own view of this problem, and they have their own theories that resonate with them personally, experientially, and emotionally. And therapists, clinicians have that bias also. So I think we are drawn to, I want confirmation of the theory that I seem to love the most. I want it to be true. So I look for confirmation that it's true, and I like it so much, or it helped me so much, that I want it to be applied everywhere. So attachment theory, everything is an attachment problem, right? To people
Well,
who are
that is
into that.
true, though. That is
Yeah.
true.
See, this is why you're my people. Oh, I love it. Of
This
course,
one is
everything is
true.
clearly an
All the
attachment
others are
problem.
wrong.
That's
All the
exactly
others are
right.
wrong, but that one is
Everything
true.
else is wrong. Everything is an attachment problem. But so I get that. We're vulnerable to that. And if we're the people seeking help, we clearly, if I am in a state where I would say I'm suffering or I'm uncomfortable or I'm having a hard time functioning, I want anything that appeals to me on an emotional level that says, this is going to fix me, especially if it's, wow, that makes sense. That resonates with me. But often, unfortunately, the science behind these things doesn't resonate because it's tiny little bits of information that get, piled up over time to sort of form a consensus. And not one of those things is is the one thing, even though we want it to be. So I think everybody can easily get drawn into that. And then in the continuous scroll attention environment that we're in right now, that makes it really easy to sell that.
Drew, we just
Yeah,
actually have an interesting question I'm seeing just now from Kevin, and actually it's really kind of related to what you were saying. So I'll just say it. So Kevin is asking, are you suggesting, Drew,
yeah.
that theory is just an opinion and not biological?
Well, Kevin, it's a good question. I'm not sure what exact theory you're talking about, but I would have to say that I don't share the opinion that any particular theory in psychology, cognition, or anything like that. This is fact because science knows for sure. I mean, we're getting to the point where a lot of things are starting to get to that consensus point, and like, yeah, the way we used to think about it isn't exactly right. But I think we run the risk of doing people a big disservice when, because we are into neuroscience or the biological side, we want biology to be the answer and the entire explanation. Just like people who are not from the bio. I mean, I'm a therapist, or I'm a behaviorist in the end, a glorified behaviorist. I would want, if I fall into that trap, I would want everything to be a behavioral problem, but it can't be. It has to be both. So I'm not totally discounting these theories. I think where Anna and I found common ground is when the theories get oversimplified and overreached and become the solution to everything, and we overpromise that theory. And I think we have to recognize that practicing therapists get to pick whatever theory they think resonates with them personally. At least in the US, we're trained like pick a theory. As long as it's a theory, you're good to go. It doesn't matter whether there's, data behind it or if it's even a good theory. As long as it seems to work for you, then you use that with your clients. So that's why there's such a wide variety of applications. That was a very long answer to a very short question. It's a good question. It's a really complicated one.
And if I can just add to that, Kevin, there is a difference between psychological theories and theories in psychotherapy.
Right.
And neuroscience. They're not the same thing, right? And lately there's been this kind of wave of neuroscience influx into therapy, which I personally think is great when it's done properly, but they're never going to become the same things. And so something being a physical reality ultimately that's neuroscience measuring, that can help us maybe create a different approach, or kind of think differently about something in psychotherapy, but they will never be the same thing. And actually there is now more and more, first of all, in neuroscience we know very little about complex behaviors. On the other hand, everything that we do in psychotherapy is about very, very complex behaviors. So kind of the social pain, or the kind of the fears and anxiety. And if we think, for example, one of the most prominent figure when it comes to kind of fear, neuroscience of fear, is one person who's going to argue against translating directly neuroscience of kind of threat conditioning
Mm,
into thinking about anxiety and fear. That's Joseph Ledoux. And so he's probably the one most famous person associated with the amygdala, and who has kind of done lots of work to functionally characterize amygdala and its kind of role in threat processing. But he's the first person to criticize then kind of talking about fear, when we use results from experiments on let's say rats or mice, because fear is a conscious feeling, and it's much more. So feelings are something that's not as simple as just affective states.
yeah.
And because of that, what can be translated is very questionable. How much of it actually, he has a good paper that's called "Bringing Back Mental to Mental Health Disorders."
Very good.
where he argues with some other neuroscientists that we can't just reduce all experience to whatever happens in firing of neurons.
Sure.
So even neuroscientists and leading neuroscientists would probably align themselves in what we're saying here.
Yeah.
And
That
I mean, again, it was a roundabout way to answer Kevin's
No,
question.
but I think it's a good answer because that's that overreaching, right? We're overgeneralizing, over kind of reaching into the neuroscience pod or the cognitive science pod. We're pulling out a little piece and then spreading it really thin to kind of draw the conclusion like, oh, well, now we know this, or we seem to have this data. So that means we can. And that isn't always the correct leap to make. I think you and
Mm-hmm.
I, when we were chatting the other day, we talked about the difference between knowing how something works and knowing how to work something. And I think that's one of the things that leads to neuroscience and psychotherapy BS. That, okay, just because we have more data about how something works doesn't mean we know how to work it. We know how the sun works. We don't know how to work the sun. Like I try to rely on that.
Mm.
And honestly, like, listen, any therapist has a limited practice. I can only see a number of people, but I also have the situation of having been in contact and had the privilege of talking with not just two, tens of thousands of people with anxiety disorders over 10 or 15 years now. And I can tell you, although it's anecdotal, but it is a very large sample, hanging your hat on neuroscience says this, so do that, or biology says this, so that it is miserably failing in the actual real world. It just is. So, I mean, I know somebody will say, well, like, what about this one paper that had, 30 subjects, or this one paper which was a single subject case study? This doesn't prove anything. I will tell you that these approaches are failing miserably when they
Well,
overpromise and underdeliver.
I mean, when you say these approaches, you're talking about actually the neurobolox approaches.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there is actually, I mean, some people might know from the audience but there is genuine kind of advances in neuroscience is slow because it's a science, right?
Right. Right.
But the things like memory consolidation and things so they are very promising treatments for trauma, and so they genuinely do have application. But
Yeah.
I mean, when you say kind of they're not done deliver, we are talking really about this kind of shortcuts and cognitive shortcuts. It's
Correct.
like, oh well, the right brain, the left brain. What I don't know
Yeah.
what would be the kind of the main neurobolox in anxiety. What is the main neurobolox in anxiety?
It's honestly, it's reducing it to a single cause and therefore single mechanism of treatment, which is never correct. Even though people would say, well, the most effective treatments we have tend to be very simplistic, which they are, but they also take place in the complexity of entire human life with all of the lived experience and the culture and the family dynamics and the behaviors. And none of it comes down to like, well, here's the one lever that we found that makes you have a panic attack. And if you just learn to pull it a little faster, that'll all go away. I mean, those things. And I agree, there's a lot of really great contribution from science into practice in the clinical world. But I think some of the stuff that we see, then we say, well, it's most effective over a very long period of time, mostly decades. And we tend to rush to like, hey, here's a new advancement. It made it onto 5 podcasts in the last 2 months, so it must be really hot. And we want to rush it to market, if you will.
Mm.
And that's where things begin to overpromise and underdeliver. So that's where I get really
And
passionate about
so
that.
I guess I guess there is kind of two extremes, and I always kind of think in terms of because I like curiosity, and I like the therapists want to kind of explore this other,
Mhm.
kind of move away from traditional ways and kind of see what is in neuroscience. So that's curiosity is a good thing. And sometimes, I kind of have this fear that I don't come across as somebody who's saying, well, let's just kind of throw away neuroscience. It's all neurobolics when it comes to therapy. So
Oh,
I think curiosity is great, but building this kind of more critical spirit and kind of the kind of the what are the criteria, who do we listen to, right? Who are these people? Who is this person who is saying this or saying that? What are their credentials? What is this based on? And I guess so it's always about, I think curiosity is good. And sometimes one, maybe for now there's not much. It is true that not much has been kind of delivered by neuroscience in general, not only for psychotherapy, because it's a kind of slow. It's still, that's still kind of a baby science, really. It's still a new science
yeah.
when it
Yep.
comes to but the I think things will happen, and there will be some things that will be great for therapy, but in the meantime we can't just kind of accept anything. One thing that you said was really interesting. So you talked about, anxiety, panic attacks, and You can't be, there's all sorts of things that happen in the wild as opposed to in the lab.
Yeah.
And I think neuroscience has been criticized from the inside for kind of doing experiments in conditions that have nothing to do with real life. And
Well,
this is going to be a whole new revolution, I sense. I mean, I'm feeling that
right.
in neuroscience, they're going to be looking for new methods that can actually emulate better or even kind of follow people in the wild, as in their
Yeah.
lives,
Yeah.
because it's very different. And I guess, when it comes to attachment, now they are, I mean, it's not still kind of scanning the brains while people live their lives, but they can have this kind of, I don't know if you've seen it, the cups, the
Mhm.
FNIRs, where
Mhm.
people actually can interact. They're not kind of sitting in the fMRI scan and because what the results they get from those kind of really unrealistic studies,
Yeah.
will they ever actually reflect what is really going on? You
It's
know.
really hard. Yeah.
Mm,
Because I mean, I'm no expert on research design by any stretch, but it is really hard to do that type of research in the real world because, like, every day life is really complicated. There's a zillion variables, and a zillion variables is always bad for any study, right? So, but it's okay that it's a new science, and I think that it's going to have a huge impact over time. We just have to be realistic and patient. My biggest beef at it, to be in the end, is in a way pushing the emotional buttons of people who are desperate for some relief and promising them things sooner than we should ever promise them. And I said, clinicians are we have our biases that make us, vulnerable to doing that stuff. The people who are consuming it, they have their biases because they're suffering in terms of consuming BS. But the researchers also, when you talk about who are you hearing this from? Unfortunately, in the environment that we're in right now, researchers have the opportunity to go from being researchers or academicians to celebrities. And that's where things get really
really,
ugly.
I don't know who you're thinking about.
Oh, I have a list. I mean, we've been talking back and forth, but like there's a whole list, but not even just in neuroscience and mental health, but like in the last 10 years, that sort of stuff has gotten to a fever pitch because I can just sit in my university and do research and they probably make a comfortable living. I don't know if you get to a senior position, you run the whole lab, or I could start doing the podcast circuit and the talk show circuit and write a book. And now I'm going to play fast and loose with my data because that pesky slow pace of science doesn't really serve me economically. And listen, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm saying they're evil, but those temptations are hard to resist sometimes. So we have to look at where that's coming from. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think it's a
Yeah,
big part of it. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. So there is, of course, and I guess so. If you think this is where slightly, I think you see the audiences between me and you.
Mhm.
I would more kind of my focus. While I agree completely what you're saying, my focus because in therapy, I would say that these kind of narratives come more from therapy gurus. People who have imposed themselves by different means as kind of whatever they say it must be true.
Yeah.
And when it comes to neuroscience wave in psychotherapy, they will have some links to neuroscience.
Mhm.
Uh, some of them, at least. While you are talking about scientists
Mhm.
who, well, they want to kind of have a breakthrough into kind of really general public and become,
Yeah.
I guess, influences celebrities, and they were scientists in the past,
Yeah.
and then they became something else. So these are kind of two different things. But I think what they have in common is this somehow getting to this status that whatever they say, right, it's going to be considered as true.
Yeah.
And I think we use that kind of word, which I mean I don't know how much is used in kind of psychotherapy world, but really kind of they kind of um achieve this status of a guru in some ways,
Mhm.
because it's not the word that's used, but I have, regularly do workshops, teach and things like that. And I will always have questions that start, but such and such says that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name any names.
I hear you.
And therefore, if he or she, usually it's a he,
Mhm.
says it, well, what are
Uh,
we talking about? How can we question that? And to me, if somebody starts making a claim about something and challenging somebody else's view, which is absolutely desirable, good and good thing
yeah, we
to
want.
put in discussion,
Yeah.
if that claim is started by such and such says this, So what are we doing there? So this is really kind of bringing the authority of the guru.
Right.
And I think, if kind of psychotherapy community, and probably also for more kind of people who use and consume kind of psychotherapy material, and kind of all kind of strategies to get better. um I mean, maybe kind of trying to see who has in their minds, who has that status, and maybe kind of question that a little bit. Why that person? How did that person earn that status? Right? I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, no. What I was going to say is, what do you think about that? And I think in our conversations before, you told me that you had some experiences yourself with that. Almost like
Yeah.
that. I don't know if you're okay to talk a little bit about that,
Yeah, we can talk about it.
as
Sure.
in kind of pressures on you to start to inhabit that kind of persona, that kind of
Yeah.
figure of a guru, or whatever, person who is looked as kind of knowing everything.
Yeah, I think I really love what you just said. If the statement starts with with the messenger as opposed to the message, we have a problem. I'm just going to flat out say we have a problem. Now, anybody in the audience who's followed along with me, this is not. This is not. I'm not claiming any higher ground here. I'm just never been personally built for that. I don't know why. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else. I'm not picking anybody else, but I don't like that. I don't want to be there. So you guys have heard me say many, many times, take everything I say with a grain of salt always. Don't just blindly follow everything I say because you like me or you think, "Oh, he helped me so much." I hope I have. I hope I've been able to educate or inspire or encourage or whatever, but never, never make the mistake of thinking I am the only one that knows and this is the guy and he is unassailable. I probably get things wrong every day. So, yet, as this thing has progressed for me, that has been handed to me again and again and again as the playbook. And those of you who follow along on my Instagram and stuff will know I always will share screenshots of the playbook when I get pitched by coaches and brand developers. And like, I will tell you exactly what they want me to say to get bigger and more popular. And they want me to create a parasocial relationship with you to make you like me more because who cares what I'm saying? If you like me and trust me and you think I'm funny or you think I have a calming voice or you like my glasses, you're more likely to follow along with me and my sphere of influence gets bigger, which means I would earn more money. But
So,
that
so
has
can
nothing
I
to do
just
with the yeah.
can I just kind of can we just pause here, because I think
Yeah.
this is really important
Yeah.
for everybody to hear, including myself. So really, you're not talking now about you heard from somebody. This is something that has happened to you.
To me.
So you're talking first-hand experiences. So
Yes.
everything who's listening now, just imagine that everybody else who we know from this sphere is really being really kind of somehow some kind of guru figure, somebody who is coming on all sorts of things, talking about things that typically people who talk about on to all topics with
Yeah.
authority.
Yeah.
So all these people would have gone through the same process as you, as kind of being pitched all this. So what happens? People get in touch with you saying, for example,
Yeah. Well, yeah, for instance, I mean, I can't say that everybody's followed the playbook, but it's just now it's years of seeing the same thing again and again and again, right? So I'm going to make a generalization. Essentially, the pitch looks like, and often it speaks to some of the stuff that you have said. They want me to attach to the most popular messengers in mental health, not the most popular messages. So I could if I were to reach out and associate myself with some I mean, we're not gonna name names, we're not gonna do that today, but, like, if I were to associate myself with some of the biggest names, and in my client sessions, when people come in and say, "Hey, did you see so and so said?" I'm gonna say, "No, I didn't, because I don't follow so and so, and they're not here today." So we're dropping that, right? But associate with the big names because and that's that thing where if this person has been really popular, they have 1,000,000, 2,000,000 followers, they've been on Oprah, they have books, like they have a giant YouTube channel. So associated with them so that I look even more authoritative. But that's about me. That's about the person. It's not about the thing I'm talking about. So, and I think to go back to what you said earlier, it's really easy, whether you're a therapist with no public facing platform or you're a therapist with aspirations to become a therapist slash influencer, you do want to consume new ideas and incorporate science into your practice. That's a good thing. Back in the day, you had to sit and read papers, and that was slow and it required a lot of commitment. Now, if I want to say I'm incorporating the newest science, I just have to listen to 5 podcasts every week while I'm driving to work. And wow, since those podcasts are huge, they must be true. And that's my science. And now I'm going to give it to my clients. Eh, not so good. So anyway, there's an entire, I don't want to get too deep into that, but yeah, there's an entire playbook that's really based on peddling. It doesn't matter if you're peddling accuracy or not, or validity or safety. It only matters that it is appealing enough to get somebody to hit the like button or the buy button or the follow button.
In other
That's it.
words, people are seen as obviously just a material to be used and kind of extracted money from, basically, in
Little
a
bit.
way.
Well, I
And
mean, that's extreme, but kinda. So my pushback often on those pitches, it's no, I can't do that. So yes, like anybody else, I want to work a little smarter. Have I reached out to a few people to like, how can I be more efficient with my social media content creation and stuff like that? I've hired none of them because every one of them I wind up in an ethical debate with. I can't say that. One of the things that I'm taught all the time is you're leaving money on the table because you need to tell them that you understand their pain and you can solve the problem. Like I can't tell them that. I can tell
mm,
them what I lived. I could tell them what I think could be helpful, but I can't tell people that to get them to give me $39 for a freaking workshop. I can't do it. And then they leave. Like, well, then you're not ready to work with me. No, I
see,
guess I'm not.
I feel a little bit offended. Nobody approached me. Is this, I don't
Oh,
know what's going on. You need to give me that
you know
playbook.
what? I'm gonna redirect all those emails to you, Anna. So that'll be all
I'm
good.
just joking. I am joking. Having said that, I will have to reassess my strategy with all this.
Uh, I mean, again, I sometimes I don't mind talking about it. And I'm glad you asked, but I talk about it only because I think it's important for people to hear. It makes me, I'm really uncomfortable right now because I feel like I'm virtue signaling and trying to like claim this moral high ground. I'm amazing. Eh,
No, I genuinely asked you because I think it's important. Usually we assume those things, and we assume this kind of cynical attitude that some people can have when they embrace these positions or kind of become figures, public figures in that sense. But I was asking you the question, so you were just answering my question
it was a good
because you
question. I
have
don't mind.
first hand experience. I think that's really interesting and doesn't, it's not something that at least I don't encounter all the time. Somebody who had this first hand experience to be tempted or to kind of be offered that kind of these possibilities. But I mean, I'm thinking like, as just really quickly before we kind of move into something else, these kind of people who, if we call them gurus, and how would you call them? People who are influencers, or I certainly call them kind of the gurus when it comes to psychotherapy world and psychotherapy kind of leaders of opinion and thought. And I've noticed, if you kind of go through, scroll through social media, there'll be as quotes from their books or talks. And very often the quote is very kind of banal or trivial and or pseudo profound without actually, so what, like what do you get from this? And
Yeah.
interestingly, recently I come across a paper that's actually, it's a kind of, I think, so a social science paper about, it's actually called Hidden Wisdom of Pseudo Profound Bullshit and the effect of speakers admirability. So what they're assessing there, they kind of got people together and, two groups, and giving them like just kind of statements that are really pseudo profound, meaning that kind of they signal some kind of profundity, that's something kind of deep, but
Mhm.
really don't mean anything. And depending how the person who is supposed to kind of give that statement or make the claim, how they're seen or perceived by the person who is reading,
Mhm.
the meaning and the kind of importance of that claim or statement will be kind of felt differently. And people who were Dalai Lama or somebody, if they say, "Oh, this is written by such and such," that we know, all those, I think, there must be something really profound here,
Mhm.
and so we feel that it's profound. And I guess the same kind of applies. To everything when it comes to things that come from these people who give us um, rules to live, I suppose, or rules by which we should kind of break this habit or do this or do that, is that, kind of, if we try to think, how would I feel about that statement if it was said by somebody random,
Yeah.
not, and I think that's another maybe kind of good thing to have on a checklist. If we think about how to sniff out bullshit, would that statement be profound in itself? Or is it just kind of the kind of the sprinkle of this stardust from this kind of really, really amazing person that makes it amazing?
Mm.
And I don't know whether whether you thought about whether kind of you did have this observation. How sometimes I read these kind of, on Substack, you can have like somebody's kind of quoting somebody, and
Yeah.
so I'm like, what does this even mean?
Well, I think, it's part of the human condition to want profundity. I think we want that. Like, we are drawn to that. We love mic drop moments. We love, oh my God, oh my God, this is amazing. This changed my life. We clearly we want that because that's at least in the scroll in the social media, world, that's the content that does the best. Mic dropping, truth bombing. I'm so brave. I'm going to say this, even though they don't want me to say this. That is the stuff that clearly does best. It does best because we want it as human beings. We crave that. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay to crave it, but now we have a delivery mechanism. So we also probably mostly crave pizza, but you have to go get it. So there's a little bit of a natural break so that you cannot just eat pizza all day long. If pizza just showed up in your kitchen 24 hours a day, as much as you want it, as fast as your thumb can scroll, we would all weigh 800 pounds and be really unhealthy. Well, now we have a profundity delivery system that never turns off. And honestly, if I, again, a little bit of my own personal experience, I know the way I come off. I get it. Look at me. I look like every other podcast bro in the world. So there is a certain segment of the population that if I say something about anxiety disorders that they maybe haven't heard before, but honestly, it's just the most basic shit. It's nothing profound. I didn't invent it. It looks like one of those Mike does podcast bro mic drop moments. You're the man. No, I'm not the man. I'm a man. So like be more critical about the way you listen to that stuff. It's okay to be inspired, but don't get swept away by the inspiration. And I love what if that was just said by the guy in the grocery store? Would you be as inspired? Would you tell everybody it changed everything for you? If it does, then cool. Go live your life that way. But
And
otherwise,
the one thing I would add when it comes to kind of psychotherapy audience, but maybe also for in general, is
mm,
that often people go, "Oh well, but he is or she is a neuroscientist," and there is a number of people who maybe have been neuroscientists in the past, as in studied neuroscience, did a PhD in neuroscience 20 years ago.
sure.
I mean, I had a different career in the past. I was not, and I don't think I'm not that person. I'm not doing that job anymore that I used to do.
Mhm,
So unless somebody is a practicing neuroscientist who has a lab and actually does specific research on the topic that they're talking about,
yep.
they're probably just using their title to kind of somehow just kind of make you forget that they're actually not talking about their own research things that they don't know. And so that's another thing I've noticed. People will use kind of some previous titles. I mean, it's full
Yeah.
of, there's lots of people like that. And what I would say to the audience is that if somebody says, oh, I'm a neuroscientist. Okay, in which way are you a neuroscientist?
Yeah.
And not because you 10 years ago studied neuroscience. That gives you maybe some, I guess, acumen to understand neuroscience literature, but
mhm,
doesn't give you authority to speak about anything from neuroscience. Actually, neuroscientists, because I speak to a really limited number of them, but sometimes I do,
Yeah.
if they ask a question that's outside of their domain of expertise, they'll just shut down that conversation. They'll just go, I can't, I mean, I have some ideas, but I know as much as you. They will not, because the only domain, neuroscience is not one monolithic thing. There's many, many, many
That's
neurosciences. And within each neuroscience, there's many, many subcategories.
yeah.
And so one person can only become an expert to kind of really, really talk expertly about that if they're working on that specific thing.
Mhm.
So saying somebody's neuroscientist because they've studied neuroscience for their degree, that doesn't make them, I suppose, suitable to offer a new method in psychotherapy that's based on neuroscience.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um,
Yeah. I think also when you see information, it's funny when you see information online that starts with the person's title. That's to me, if we're talking about how to sniff out the BS in the scroll, if you ever see me post anything that says I'm a therapist and just run me over with your car, you have permission to take me out of the game because I've gone off the deep end. Like
mm.
normally, nobody starts a conversation that way unless what they're basically telling you is, I want you to follow, I need you to hit the like button, the follow button, and believe me. That's not okay. Like, use your profile. Your profile on social media says you're a therapist. Cool. Like, I can find out about Anna Lund by just clicking two more buttons. It's all good. Like, I don't need her to tell me I'm a therapist. So what I'm about to tell you is really important and game changing. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm a cognitive science scientist. but we are all susceptible to that. We like simplicity. It's okay. I mean, really, if you look at some of the neuroscience, and I don't claim to have vast knowledge of neuroscience at all, but I try to apply it in at least an intelligent way or in a limited way, a very cautious way. Our brains are kind of seem to be wired to just find an easily accessible story that it can kind of believe because it's metabolically cheap and it works. And like, okay, I can act on that. Is it accurate? I don't know. That's more complicated thinking that costs a lot of calories. So I ain't doing that. So we are vulnerable to simplicity. Well, that person's a therapist, and they said, so it must be true. I probably say things that are wrong 40% of the day. I just maybe don't know it. I don't know. So like that's possible. We have to all consider that possibility. So I don't
You
know.
know what you just said. It's interesting because as in saying, kind of our brains are wired to kind of look for simplicity. See, when it comes to psychotherapy, I over time on my kind of really short journey in this world, as in kind of psychotherapy and neuroscience.
Yeah.
Initially, I was told and repeated many times, well, don't try to kind of make it more complicated. They just don't want it. And what they want simplicity, just dumb it down. They don't care. It's a metaphor anyways. And so I kind of found a cynical side in that world of people who are offering almost like, well, they don't know really. Just give them anything. They'll kind of buy anything. And then I had a different experience when if I teach or kind of, give talks and things, I always, because it's interesting to me to make it more complex. It's more complex, and I initially I was afraid because I thought, well, nobody's gonna understand. They're gonna think, well, why are you bringing all that? What's? I don't care about all this neuroscience or these models. But actually, I was surprised by the reaction. I don't think ever. Actually, people ask for more.
Mm, that's good.
And so there is, to me, I'm hopeful because I think there must be a disconnect, maybe a disconnect between what we think therapists want
Mm,
or even maybe general public. Because sometimes we want what's there if there is nothing better available. So imagine there's neuroscientists who, they do neuroscience, but most of them don't really worry about how they're going to make their science a bit accessible to, general public.
mhm.
And then so there's that, so that we don't understand. And there's like a really dumbed down, completely oversimplified version. So basically there's no choice in between. But
Yeah.
imagine if there is a choice, because sometimes we choose what's available.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And because my experience is really that people actually they're like, give me more of that, give me complex, yeah, make it kind of make it useful for us therapists.
Mhm.
But so I was never, nobody ever told me, oh, that was too complicated. I was always told, well, just kind of, oh, this is just fascinating. I'm gonna go and look now, look up those things and read about these papers and stuff. So I think maybe we are underestimating people.
Mhm.
And everybody is assuming, oh, everybody just wants simplicity. And of course, we have, it's nice. Simple is nice, of course.
Mm.
But I think people can maybe tolerate more complexity if we give them more complexity, which is done in a way that it's useful for them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And exciting
understandable.
for them.
Yeah, applicable, like practical
Of
or
course. And relevant. Like, okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the introducing complexity, I actually do it in my practice. I mean, probably one of the most common phrases that my clients hear from me is, "Am I getting too nerdy?" Which I know I am going 100% against the training, which was always like, no jargon, no nothing. I'm not going to fill the session with jargon. But I think when it's appropriate, I will say, "Do you want to know a little bit more about what I think science tells us in this area?" And often they'll be like, "Yeah, let's talk about that." They feel a little bit more empowered, a little more grounded.
Hmm.
But I always have to be super careful to say, this is a very small, like, this is a narrow view of this one particular topic. This is not a generalization that explains your entire life, right? So you have to be really careful about that.
Unless
But
it's attachment. Unless it's
then, of course,
attachment.
it I walked right into that. I'm going to learn. I will learn. I promise. And of course, it applies. But I think what's interesting about that is how else do you sniff out? Where the topic is how do you sniff out the nonsense in the scroll? It's how vehemently is the person like absolutely tied to that orientation or that message and absolutely unwilling to hear anything outside of that. So, for instance, in the work that I do, which is generally centered on anxiety disorders, I'm going to tell you that like not everything is a third wave mindfulness and acceptance problem. It just can't be. It couldn't possibly be, right? So if you come with a particular problem, I might tell you, well, I'm probably not your best bet for like help, or like I'm not actually talking. That's not what I'm talking about in this post. So like take that with a grain of salt. I think it's really important to recognize that, like, I don't know. If the person is trying to tell you that, like, the thing that they believe or like the most or are profiting from is always the answer, and they resort instead of, like, having a debate about it and being nuanced about it and understanding that maybe there's different applications in different contexts, they wanna shut down the conversation because you're just a hater or you're not brave enough to see the truth. Like, those are not good ways to judge the data that you're consuming or the information you're consuming about your mental health. So, that's just another little, I think, a hint that I
So,
would,
so you would say if the kind of a sign, telltale sign, would be somebody who's kind of too much insisting that that's the only way.
rigid, very rigid, and almost evangelical about what they're talking about. So there have been times when I'm not. You guys know me. Whoever knows me, I'm no shrinking violet. So I'm happy to engage in a debate or a discussion. No problem there. But there have been times when I have gotten into discussions online, and I am shut down because maybe I don't agree with that person. But the emotional fervor with which that person is arguing and their audience is arguing on their behalf, which is another thing you guys heard me say,
Mm.
never defend me in the comment section. That is not your job. But then their audience, who is emotionally attached to the messenger, starts to argue in favor also. I've been called uneducated, unhealed, angry because I didn't agree that a ghost from the future knows about special things in celery that will fix OCD. And when I called that out,
You're
I
talking in
was
code. You're
attacked.
talking in code now. What do you mean? What goes from the future?
There's a dude, I don't know how popular he is anymore. We said we weren't going to name names, but you guys might know who this is, who everything is based on the fact that he is the only person on the planet that speaks to a spirit from the future that told him that there are special kinds of salts that we don't know about now that exist in
Sauce.
salts, special salts, versions of NaCl, right? Or CaCl.
Sorry, I'm gonna
Like,
understand that.
yeah. So there's special version of that we haven't discovered yet, but that if you use all these celery products, celery, he has made all kinds of claims, including in my sphere, which is this will fix your depression, your anxiety, your OCD. And when I said, like, where does this come from? I was attacked in the most vicious way. Doesn't matter to me. I mean, I'm still sleeping at night just fine. But in the end, you have to really look at that and say, why did they attack the debate? Well, I was called unhealed, angry, and closed-minded. Okay. But that has nothing to do with, can you show me what is this chemical structure of this new salt? Oh, but conveniently you can't because you're not a scientist and you only got it from a spirit from the future that only you can hear and talk to. So that's just one example, but like,
I'm just smiling because I'm also on the side of all this. I'm kind of I have this really fascination for all these kind of fringe stories and narratives, and that's the one I've never heard.
oh, it's a
Told.
good one. This person was quite popular and I think associated with some pretty big names in media. I don't want to say Oprah, but that sort of level. And again, it's just a silly little thing that happened to me a couple of years ago. But I think how to sniff out nonsense is the argument in favor of the nonsense is based on personal attack or emotional appeal. Like, no, I actually don't want to talk about the real application. I just want to talk about why you're wrong and you should shut up. Like, you're just not open-minded enough to understand the genius of this particular person.
And I guess related to that, another kind of red flag for me, I mean, I don't know if you would agree, Drew, is the overconfidence of claims. And I wrote about this in the last post on Substack. It's how, when I talk to people who are followers of certain kind of neuroscience application in psychotherapy, I'm not going to name names, they have this like really, oh, this is how it works. Then I'm just going to say polyvagal theory. So I
Oh,
had supervisors
I
that
knew
tell
it
me,
was coming.
I'm looking and she's like, this happens, then this happens,
Yeah.
then this happens. In order to become social engaged, you need to do this and then. And I was like, wow. And then I talked to a social neuroscientist
Mhm.
who day in day out works with this, and he's kind of, we have to be cautious and kind of be very very kind of cautious about the claims, always underlying the fact that there is so much we don't know, that there is a contradictory data about this and that. And so on one hand, you have a person who has it all, figured, right? This is how it works. The brain works like this and sociality works like this. On
Mhm.
the other side, you have a social neuroscience who's like, sounds like, oh, well, talking more about they don't know. And so naturally we kind of feel, well, I'm going to listen to this one. This one has it all figured out. But actually it's the other way around. So really, I feel that while it's uncomfortable, it would be really good for us to embrace this uncertainty, not knowing, epistemic humility, saying, well, sometimes we know this and this, but there's all these things we don't know. But it's okay, a little by little, we'll know more and more.
No.
That's better than saying we know everything and all of that being neurobolics.
Because in the end, overreaching and we know everything. By the way, epistemic humility is going to be the highlight of my day. Just saying. I'm going to put it on record right now. But
Please. With my name, with
yes,
90%.
100%. Anna Lund, you will get full credit for that 100%. But I think, one of the things that's so dangerous about that is sometimes do we forget? I don't know if we forget. I try not to ascribe, malicious intent to everybody that's doing this. I think people really do want to help. And they probably just have bought into it themselves so much that they genuinely believe that they are correct. But you got to be able to hear the feedback coming from the bottom up. So ultimately, at the bottom of this pyramid are the consumers of that information. And when they are all, a large number of them, statistically significant number of them are saying, that did nothing for me, or that frustrated me, or that didn't make sense, or that didn't resonate with me, you can't hang on to the 15% that were like, this changed my life, this is awesome, and get rid of the rest and say, look, it's proof. There's a concept in theory and therapy, and I know you know this, that all therapy works. It's really about the relationship between the therapist and the client. So yeah, a lot of different approaches may resonate and have it, but we never would say that this one is the definite one.
How do you call it? The common factors, yeah?
Yeah, right. So but we have to be careful about that. And I think I knew that the word polyvagal was going to come up at some point in this hour. And I'm so happy that you were the one that did it. Oh, no, we're not going to name names. That I think is another one that we have to, how do you sniff it out? Well, if it's just taken as an absolute unassailable thing, that's a problem. Like, yeah, but he said, I'm not going to say the guy's name. Yeah, but have you seen what he said? Yeah, I did. And he's wrong. And everybody keeps telling him he's wrong, but like he has built a nice following here of people who just feel that seems so right, then they want to use it. So that's another way to sniffing out. Hey, listen, one day, I don't know, maybe I'll live to see it. Maybe it'll be long after all of us are gone. I don't know. The things that you and I are relying on may be shown to be obsolete, and we have new ways to do things. I hope so.
I mean,
Yeah.
I want to think.
Yeah.
I like to think. I don't know whether people would agree. People who interact with me a little bit on my posts. I like to think of myself who invites
Yeah.
critique. I like to think of myself somebody who invites the debate.
Mhm.
And I will always, if somebody interacts with me, say, well, what about this and that, I will actually make an effort and look at this other alternative claim. And actually, sometimes it has happened that has informed my thinking.
Sure. Well, why not?
As in, yeah. I mean, of course, I don't, I change my opinions all the time based on how I learn about especially when I talk about neuroscience. Now I'm aware of we have around 5 minutes left, and we've been bashing the therapists. And but we haven't been bashing scientists that much, but they're not 100% innocent in the whole thing.
No.
And I mean, I don't know whether we can kind of squeeze something in there in a few minutes.
Yeah, I can chill a little longer if you want. No worries.
You can. What do you mean? You can squeeze
I can hang. Yeah, I can hang out a little longer if you really want. Sure.
Yeah. So maybe if that's okay. Yeah. So if somebody wants to stay for bashing of scientists, we'll give it extra 10 minutes.
I'm just laughing at this the selling of crystals in the comment section. You guys are cracking me up. I love it. Anyway.
Well, crystals are true though.
And attachment theory. These are attachment crystals. Get them while they're hot. Jack is selling them.
Attachments. Let me write this down.
Write it down. Got it from me.
Yeah. So I guess anyway. the kind of what we would call as science overreach. Yeah. So there is kind of the case of scientists that you mentioned that maybe were bona fide scientists, and then they kind of try to expand their and create an empire. So that's one thing. But there's also scientists who really kind of work in science. They neuroscience, they will work on their things, but then they will try to, I suppose then, sometimes, so there is two cases for me. Sometimes there is really trying to generalize their finding. And I can think of somebody who it was about who works in social neuroscience, and it was about cynicism. His work is about cynicism, but then kind of goes from what they were doing in the lab,
Mm,
extending that and extrapolating to kind of life rules, which I thought so it was ended up being this naive positive psychology narrative that he was giving, that whoever is a bit cynical in life, they're unhappy,
right.
and and that, in the end of the day, also making some relations to attachment. So if you're cynical, you are insecurely attached. All of that was very, he had his kind of basic research that was, solid, I think.
Sure.
But then extrapolation was really, compared to kind of narratives that, life narratives that we encounter every day in therapy, was so shallow, was so kind of devoid of any depth and understanding of what life is. Even thinking that, sometimes being negative about life is a protection, and we as therapists know that.
Mm,
And it can be a good protection. It's not always a positive thing to be positive about everything. I mean, it's a
yeah.
complicated issue. But to me, I and sometimes that makes me sad, because I think then, they kind of then go out of their expertise to give advice on general life without really becoming interested about what happens, with, they kind of don't go and talk to therapists, but they will kind of give general advice from this higher up position of a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. And this is something that also I always take with a grain of salt. If it's a neuroscientist is making general claims about life, I just think, well, are you kind of generalizing? I could go into more details, some examples. There's also some examples about altruism. Is altruism making you happy or not? And so, some recent studies say, well, one study says, oh, altruism is making you more happy than being kind of centered on your own self-care. And
Mm,
so that's kind of a general claim. And then when you look at the study, I mean, it's like a few, some people doing something that really, to me, it's like, that doesn't show that.
yeah. Yeah. Well,
That it is not really, this is kind of a lab situation. I don't know how much of that can be extrapolated into real life. And so it's sometimes scientists also kind of lose that caution how much their work can be generalized.
mm.
And I guess they access that hubris where they think, well, now I know it all, and I'm going to tell to people how to live lives. And that's dark side of neuroscience, or science in general, which I don't like. I mean, I don't know what would you say about overreach of neuroscience or science in general when it comes to psychotherapy or kind of self-help?
I mean, I think it's science in general. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, and when we were texting back and forth, we can go back to Carl. And listen, I am an unabashed Carl Sagan fanboy. Everybody knows that. I love me some Carl Sagan. But even back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of heat thrown at him from the scientific community because, he would show up on talk shows, and there was a lot of concern that, like, well, are you a celebrity or are you an astrophysicist or an astronomer, whatever he was? He was an astronomer. Like, why are you overreaching your subject matter? Why are you generalizing these things? So even back then, I guess the science celebrities, how about people who lived in the 1800s where science lectures were entertainment? Like, I suspect there might have been a lot of that going on too. Sensationalistic scientific claims would fill an auditorium on a Friday night when there was no TV or radio or anything else to do. But I think it's existed forever, probably. I think the pressure maybe to do it now. I mean, listen, being a research scientist seems like a very demanding thing. You are publishing or perishing. You got to bring in that next grant. Like, and I suspect that the institutions that support those activities also have their own interests that can be easily swayed, because that's money that comes into the university and it's their prestige. And I think a research institution looks even better when their lab head, who was previously obscure, becomes a real big celebrity because of one study that then gets super overgeneralized and watered down. I think there's a lot of temptation because we're all human.
Do you know interesting trivia, which I'm not even sure it's true. So I'll see if
Is it
somebody from the
bollocks?
audience
Is this
will,
trivia bollocks, Anna?
maybe somebody from the audience will be able to correct me. So I think, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it could have been Carl Sagan that actually popularized the idea of the lizard brain. But not
We might be
wanting
right.
I think it kind of got out of hand. I don't think he was referring to what we think it
Yeah,
is today, but I
yeah.
think he used that expression. And because of course he was really good with words, you see, this is the magic of words, because that's kind of the idea of the lizard brain. It's so sticky right in our mind.
Yeah,
You just want it to kind of be true. And I'm not saying that he popularized the neurobollocks, but I think he
I get it.
actually was the one who kind of came up with that idea, and then it kind of started having a life of its own.
Yeah.
What do you
It's so
say?
funny that you mentioned that. First of all, be careful with Carl Sagan. Just saying. No, I'm joking. But when I wrote 7% Slower, which is one of the books I've written, there's a lizard on the cover of that book. Now, I use the lizard brain metaphor all throughout that book. Do I regret it a little bit 3 or 4
Please,
years later?
yes.
Yes, a little bit I do, but also I still use it, except you have to be really careful. Like, this doesn't mean that there's a special, like, part of your brain that has special knobs and levers, and if we just do these exact things, it hits the knob and pushes the button. It seems to be a way that people, I can't argue with the fact that people identify with that. So sometimes we can use that. And even stuff like polyvagal theory, which is nonsense, but if you identify with it, maybe I can use that framework to help you make the change that you're trying to make in your life. So we have to adapt a little bit. But yeah, it's an interesting anecdote because, full disclosure, there's literally like a little cartoon lizard on the cover of that book. And I use lizard brain all the time, only because
Well,
it's a
that's
simple way
it.
for people to
I
recognize
will have to
we can't
erase
be friends now.
this
That's
Substack
exactly right.
live from. I'm gonna edit this. I'm,
It's just going to be, this part has
I'm
to
gonna
come out. Yeah.
I'm good with this. Is going to
But,
have to undergo some censorship.
I think part of it, to be completely honest with you, and again, I'm not trying to claim any moral high ground here, but like 5 years ago, the person I am today and the person I was 5 years ago professionally would have to change. Am I right? Like, you are too. Everybody in the room should be. So I
And so we
really,
should. And so we
right.
should.
So I wouldn't really write that. I mean, was I really steeped in neuroscience when I did that? No, I probably overused the term and maybe still do, but that would have to change because I cannot rigidly adhere to that. Although people would be more than happy in my audience to follow along if I keep saying lizard brain. I have to be aware of that responsibility and make sure I don't do it. So, that's a thing. So I don't know. But I think that the temptation in science has always been there, and I think it's a difficult situation because they're competing for research dollars, and notoriety brings in more dollars, and I get
And
it.
I mean, you
So,
see it from that perspective of kind of monetary perspective. I also see it because I do think that, with some exceptions, neuroscientists might tend to think of themselves as kind of being more expert on human nature than a therapist. Actually, over time, because of the kind of the titles, the PhD, the kind of the I guess the microcosm they revolve in,
mhm,
they might, it's a matter of hubris, right? Where you feel, well, I've had this amazing result in the lab, well, that must apply to everything.
yeah,
And then that kind of crosses the line, and that's where I think, they would benefit of talking to other professionals, as because therapists, we are really, and people with kind of lived experience, we are experts of lived experience as
mhm,
people. And also people who are therapists, they kind of see people going through their struggles as in kind of in their lives, rather than seeing it as a experimental setup.
yeah,
And some experimental setups are really kind of, almost ridiculous how because they have to kind of do things in a way that's so simple to
yeah,
be reproducible and things like that. And that you wouldn't believe, like, what means, how do they measure, let's say, fear in rodents, and how that applies in fear in humans. They were doing electroshocks on,
yeah.
on, on, on rats, but it's not the same as somebody, experiencing fear in as a human in life. And so, yeah, I guess, so everybody's to blame, right?
Yeah,
Everybody's to blame.
everybody. Yeah, everybody. We hate
And I
everybody.
think
No,
that's
I'm
true. I
joking.
think therapists are to blame for not being more critical.
Yeah.
Thought leaders in therapy for not making more effort, or maybe also for being motivated maybe by some wrong motives, and also for maybe accepting this, or how would you call it, kind of maybe falling for this kind of guru of status of guru, because I think it's tempting. If somebody tells you all the time, you are amazing, Drew, you are amazing, Drew,
Yeah.
you're amazing, you start to think, I must be amazing.
That only happens on the screen though, man. Can you guys call everybody in my life and let them know that? No, I'm joking, but well, I think,
But that
one
is a good
little
point.
point.
I think
It
for
is a good
gurus is the
point.
same. I think for the
Yes.
gurus is the same
Well,
because
what's interesting about that though is if you are in the scientific world, it is based on not being amazing. Like my job as a scientist, if I am one, and I'm not, by the way, would be to challenge the guy in the lab next door, the person do like and that person should want me to question what they did. That's the whole idea. We question each other, we challenge those things. We don't just take it as gospel, and we don't like get behind the thing just because we like the person in the next lab. But in the environment where now that information gets disseminated into this environment, like the one you and I are literally in right now, talking to these 175 people, this environment is based on oh my God, this is let me introduce you to my amazing new friend, Anna. She's unbelievable. She's awesome. I mean, she is.
I
But
know, I know.
at the same time, like we have gotten the data comes out of an environment where we want to question it it built into the structure is question it and don't automatically believe it. And it gets disseminated into a distribution network where we don't want to question it. We want it to be life changing. We want it to be amazing. All the influencers are patting each other on the back and pumping each other's hands and telling everybody's all amazing. Look at all the influencers together in the podcast conference and the social media marketing conference. It's the exact opposite. So if you want to know how to sniff it out, be careful of this influencer says something and then the other influencer confirms what they said, but they're both just people with a lot of likes after the posts. Where did it actually come from? Follow the chain back. But guess what? That's really hard to do. And it's time consuming. Who's going to do it? Who's going to sit and go 6 papers back, 6 levels up from that social media post?
I
Nobody.
mean, I think sometimes you can do a little bit and then you get the idea who's who.
A
You
little
don't
bit.
have to
Yeah.
do it all the
Yeah.
time. But I'm guessing just because of the time. So
Yeah.
finally, in the end of the day, if we were gonna say, so what are the things to look out for? What did you say? Oversimplification.
Yeah.
So one thing that explains everything. So that's a red flag. What did we say? The gurus,
Yeah.
the overconfidence, the if something
Rigidity.
is rigidity,
Yeah.
if something is scientifically proven, doesn't mean that actually we know how to work it.
Right.
Right?
Or just because we know how it works doesn't mean we know how to work it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the last one, bashing of the scientists. Scientists might know something when it comes to the lab, but it's not all. Everything is general, and doesn't not everything can be extrapolated. So we also have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
And it's everybody's fault. So, and what do I say?
And it's everybody's fault, except for
I
the
would just
attachment people. It's not their fault at all.
And I would just one last thing is just whatever this conversation has sparked for you, still,
Oh,
remain curious, go for crazy ideas, explore crazy ideas. Some crazy ideas are really good. And if we didn't get to answer many questions, but once this is posted on our Substacks, feel free to ask questions in the comment section and we will answer them, I
yeah.
suppose.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to say other than I'm amazing, which I knew already? But
No, it's all good. Thanks for having me on. It was really fun. Like, we should do this again. I'll have you on mine, even though I have a much smaller audience. So we'll do it again. This is great. Yeah.
that's amazing. Thank you, everybody, for being with us, for bearing with us, and speak to you soon.
Yeah. We'll do it again soon.
Bye. Bye bye.
Yeah.